Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Fantasy Football Breakdown. We have a beardless Fee this week on the show, but we have a lot to talk about. Last week we did pretty well last week, and it was a record-setting show. And after the wildest trade deadline that I can remember, we may have another long show on our hands. So I'm your host, Wayne Cavati, and we're going to jump right into it today. We're going to welcome back first Beardless Fee. Fanduel Fee, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited. I had a really good week last week, and I just want to build off of that and put together another solid week this week.
Dunton, welcome back from North Carolina.
How are you? I did not have a good week because Derek Carr sucks. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah, we are going to talk about it later, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. First, I want to talk about something we spoke about last week. It was the first buy it or BS question. You both may remember that it was, is Frank Reich to blame for Matt Ryan? And you guys said no. Fee, you said it was the GM for trading for Matt Ryan. Dutton, you didn't think it was his fault, but we have to look at it this week, right? Because he had a 38-year-old Matt Ryan who he made throw the ball 50 times. And then he had a young 24-year-old quarterback with a fresh arm, and he dialed back the offense and only threw 22 times?
Yeah.
Are we really going to – and then on Tuesday, what happens? His offensive coordinator gets fired? Are we really – is Indianapolis really going as far out of their way to blame the problem of what's going on and going to fire everybody else? And bench everybody else until they figure out that the actual problem is the man in charge? Like, when is that point realized?
Yeah, I don't know. And they made a dumb move that we're going to talk about in a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think they're just trying to wait to see what coaching's vacancies are coming up and then see what they can do in the offseason. I don't think Frank Reich makes it past Black Monday.
No, he can't. He's terrible. There's a lot of terrible coaches right now, and it's hard to figure out which is the worst one. One of them was coaching the guy you were just talking about, and
Right.
David Carr. Derek Carr. I mean, that game, that Raiders-Saints game was atrocious. Well, you're right. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but for now, let's get into trade deadline buyer or bullshit. That was an extended version.
I liked it.
I think this is the trade you were talking about, Dunton. It's the first one we're talking about. Nyheim Hines went to Buffalo. Fee, we'll start with you. Buy it or BS. Nyheim Hines will become very fantasy relevant in Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm buying it. Nyheim Hines brings an exceptional receiving skill set. And the Bills running backs, Singletary, I mean, they just got rid of Moss, but Singletary and even James Cook, who's really just a rookie, I don't think we're necessarily kind of going to be, game breakers for them. And I think bringing in Nyheim Hines, who's proven to us in the past that he's been exceptional at catching the ball, out of the backfield. And I think he's going to get a bunch of work. The Bills are a passing team, obviously. They're not going to be running the ball very much. He can block on third down. He's proven that. So I think he's going to be a fairly decent sized part of this Bills offense. So I think he is going to become fantasy relevant.
Dutton.
I don't think he is. I'm going to BS it. I think there's too many mouths to feed on that offense. I think he's a good third down transition back. I think Fee said it right. He's going to catch some balls, but are you going to throw to Nyheim Hines or are you going to throw to Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis, right? I mean, so I don't know. I think it's a good move for the Bills. They already have Cook. They already have Singletary. But I think he's a good change of pace, but I don't know if he's going to be fantasy relevant. I think he might be a good plug and play if need be, but I don't know. It's a hard one because the Bills, they don't run the ball much, so I don't know how much work their running back is going to get.
I think 1 point for Fee for good points, 2 points for Dutton. And I think I just don't like James Cook wasn't that bad, right? I know that I remember he had the fumble and then he got, his workload got minimized and then they went back to Moss. This is earlier in the season. They went back to Moss a little bit and then they realized that Moss just wasn't what they thought he was. So they went back to Cook. Cook looks good. Singletary is maddening because when he looks good, when he breaks a good run, you're like, all right, now he's getting it now. And then he just looks like Singletary the rest of the time. So I do think that I think it's a great real move. I think it's a great real move for the Buffalo Bills. I'm not sold on how fantasy relevant he will be. But the reason I'm giving Fee a point is because in the PPR, in that Buffalo Bills offense, he may be able to get you 10 points a week. And all of a sudden you are looking at a nice flex play.
Right.
Okay, buy it or BS, because this is a fantasy football breakdown favorite, and I don't know if we'll continue to be a favorite on the team that he went to, because Kirk Cousins is not a fantasy football breakdown favorite. Dutton, buy it or BS. The Lions got totally fleeced in trading TJ Hawkinson.
I don't think they did. I'm going to BS it because I think they're going to rebuild with the draft picks they got. I mean, and let's be honest, Hawkinson has 395 yards and 3 touchdowns this year, and he had 179 yards in one of those games, right? So more than half of his yards came from one game, basically. So I think the Lions are looking into their future. And if they can get, I mean, would they get a 2nd-round pick and a 3rd-round pick for him?
But they also gave up picks. That's the part
weird. That's the weird part. That's the weird part, right?
What was it, a 2nd and a 4th, right? They gave up.
Right.
Yeah.
But they do open up cap room because the Lions are picking up his nearly $10 million, that they'll have to pay him next year. I mean, the Vikings, sorry.
Right.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I'm going to BS it. I think the Lions are looking into their future and the Vikings are looking for now.
Of course. That I agree with. Fate?
I agree with everything Dutton said. However, I'm buying that the Lions got fleeced because of exactly what you just said. The trade was Hawkinson and 2 4th-round picks.
2 4th-round picks.
For a 2nd and a 3rd. So they gave up 2 4th-round picks and Hawkinson just to get a 2nd and a 3rd back. I don't know that that's necessarily good value for them. Especially giving up a tight end who's as good as Hawkinson is and has proven to be in the past. I don't, and I understand, you want draft picks and like tight end isn't necessarily a game-changing position. But I just think that they gave up too much and didn't get enough back for it to be as much value as they could have gotten for Hawkinson. Unless the market was just really sour around tight ends, and obviously the Vikings needed one because of Irv Smith's high ankle sprain.
Yeah.
So they obviously needed to pick up another tight end. So maybe the market just wasn't there, but the Lions were looking to move him anyway. But I don't know. I think it's BS, and I think that they didn't get enough value back for trading him.
1 point for Dutton, 2 points for Fee on that one. And I think one thing that you're both leaving off that really surprised me is they went in division, right? Like it was an in division trade on top of all that. I just don't understand it. Fee, I do agree with the point that you made that tight end isn't a game-changing position, but a young TJ Hawkinson, he's still relatively young in a league where he was probably the 5th or 6th best in the conversation. I felt like they didn't need to give up any more draft picks, especially because I agree with what Dutton said, that they're going to go into a full rebuild. A team that's going into a full rebuild shouldn't be giving up. You want to give up draft picks, give up your 6th and 7th rounders, not 2 4th rounders. I don't know. It was a Matt Millen-esque Lions move, and I thought that they had moved on from him, but apparently he's still calling the shots.
The ghost of Matt Millen strikes again.
Buy it or BS. Fee. The Chicago Bears we have no freaking clue what the Bears are doing. They, in a matter of 4 days, they traded their 2 best defenders and then became buyers for a mediocre wide receiver. Fee, what's going on in Chicago?
Well, I don't know really. I'm going to buy that who the hell knows what's going on in Chicago, because no one really does.
Them included, I think.
the thing there, this is the Bears are such an enigma because I like what they're doing on offense. They're making moves to kind of help Justin Fields out. Justin Fields has looked very good the last 3 weeks. And their offense has been halfway decent. Granted, it's all been mostly on the ground, but now you pick up a Chase Claypool and you give Justin Fields all of a sudden, receiver who's 6'4" and can probably, make some plays for you. So I like what they're doing on the offense, but then to turn around and just dump all your defensive guys,
right,
who are really, really good, just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't know what they plan on doing with those draft picks because, I don't know. I'm confused.
Dutton.
I think the Bears are committing to Justin Fields. I think Fee said it. They have $114 million in cap space going into next year. They have a stockpile of draft picks. I think Chase Claypool is a stopgap until they get, I don't know, Marvin Harrison Jr. or, in the draft. I mean, Justin Fields has proven that he's not as bad as people thought he was, because you look at that offensive line that's terrible and no weapons around him, and he's still better than many other quarterbacks right now. So in your question of who knows what they're doing, I think they're committing to Justin Fields. And I think if you're Justin Fields, I don't know if the Bears necessarily won that trade, but Justin Fields won that trade because the Bears have committed to him.
Yeah, but what are they doing on deep? Why are they sending away all of their defensive?
Because
you said it. They are stockpiling draft picks. Why do they need more? They should probably keep those guys.
Well, first of all, Dutton, where I agree with you is that they are helping Justin Fields on this move, but the reason they're helping Justin Fields is because they failed miserably attempting them. Okay, Darnell Mooney was all helium coming into this year, and he's come back to earth, right? He had the hot finish to last year. He was the must-get guy in fantasy, and he stinks this year, right? And then they went out and they got a whole bunch of rehash guys, and they all flopped. N'Keal Harry, Brown, St. Brown, Dante Pettis, Brian Pringle's on the IR. Like, they went out and they got all these cast-offs, and they're like, yeah, these are going to be the guys. And there's not even a resemblance of consistency among them. So I get that you're trying to help Fields with a Claypool who could be consistent. But I'm going back to Fee here that the defense, it just makes no sense. Right. It doesn't make sense. You can't.
Well, it's odd because we're not used to the Bears giving up on defense, right? The Bears have historically been known as a defensive team, and now all of a sudden they want to be an offensive team.
Yeah. They did not have to give up those defensive players to get Claypool. They traded for Claypool, and that's fine. And that works. And I'm happy that they did that. It helps out Justin Fields. It helps out their offense significantly, I think. But I don't think there's any correlation for that for them to be giving up defensive guys. Like, they didn't have to give the defensive guys away to get Chase Claypool. You know what I mean?
The Bears defense was holding people and giving Justin Fields a shot.
Yeah.
Chase Claypool is not going to help them win games 42-45, which they're going to have to do now without Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn, right? Like, they don't have that offense. It's weird. It's weird. All right, next up on Buy It or BS. Fantasy football breakdown non-favorite. Chase Edmonds gets traded to the Broncos, where there's an opportunity for him to claim the number one spot. Dutton, buy it or BS? Chase Edmonds still sucks.
Oh, I'm totally buying it. He still sucks. I mean, it doesn't matter where he goes. He's not good. The Broncos are not going to help Chase Claypool's stock at all. The Broncos were lucky to beat the Jaguars this weekend in London, only because Trevor Lawrence threw 2 interceptions that were terrible interceptions. And yeah, no, it doesn't matter where Chase Edmonds is right now. I don't have any confidence in him. So I'm buying that he still sucks.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy that got traded twice in 4 months now.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm buying it. He absolutely still sucks. Everything Dutton said, I agree with. There's no chance that he's going to do anything in Denver other than be Melvin Gordon's backup.
But so Gordon's been doing very well receiving since Javonte Williams went down. And Latavius Murray's been doing the bashing up the middle. I just don't even see where Chase Edmonds fits in. We've already established on this show that he can't run between the tackles. And his biggest weapon is that he's a receiver. But like I said, Gordon's been doing really well in the check down game. I just don't see where he even fits in.
Yeah, so what I was gonna say was, do we think that the Broncos think that Chase Edmonds is going to be there between the tackles guy and keep Melvin Gordon as their pass catching back, and like Chase Edmonds is kind of going to be like the 1A and 1B to Latavius Murray? Like, is that the plan?
But remember at the beginning of the show, I was talking about bad coaches. Allow me to introduce you to Nathaniel Hackett, because I wouldn't put it past him that yes, that maybe he does think that, and I don't.
Well, or Elway thinks that.
Yeah. What do we think about? I didn't put this on the buy it or BS list, but what do we think about Jeff Wilson going to be Mostert's backup? I think that's a great pickup for the Dolphins. Fee, you're nodding in agreement.
Oh yeah, I absolutely think that's a fantastic pickup. They both played together in San Francisco. They both Jeff Wilson has played under the
McDaniel.
Miami, right?
Mike McDaniel, yeah.
McDaniel. So he kind of knows what's going on there. And listen, they got rid of Edmonds, but now they pick up Jeff Wilson, who could be an outstanding backup and, injury replacement if something should happen to Raheem Mostert, and already like knows the offense and can play in it and be good in it. Jeff Wilson was I don't want to say solid, but he was a decent running back in San Francisco when he had a couple of chances.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a solid pickup for Miami.
Dutton, what do you think?
I think it's a great pickup because I think the Dolphins have not made a wrong move yet. I think everything they've done last offseason and this year, they've pushed the right buttons. So, I mean, I'm not going to question anything they do. I mean, the familiarity with the coach, the offense, it's a good, again, change of pace back. He's going to be a great backup. When I say great, it doesn't mean he's going to dominate, but he's a solid guy that can, he doesn't fumble the ball. He's going to do what he needs to do. And I think the Dolphins are pushing all the right buttons.
Yeah. And I do think, I don't know about this week. I do agree, Fee, that, he can step right into this offense because he pretty much knows the playbook and the coaching. But I don't know how quickly that is, but I do think in 2 or 3 weeks, I think you could play either one of these, Mostert or Wilson. I think they'll both get enough carries to be kind of flex type players. So yeah, I do think it's a great move as well. Moving on in buy it or BS, after a wonderful Monday Night Football game, Joe Mixon, Fee, we'll start with you. Joe Mixon is fantasy football garbage. Buy it or BS?
I'm gonna say BS. He's kind of fantasy garbage right now, but it's not really because of him. It's more so because the Bengals are fantasy garbage right now. And, no Jamar Chase, so they have a very limited pass game. T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, very good receivers, but for whatever reason, they can't really get it done without Jamar Chase, which is odd because really they should still be able to get it done.
Plenty of talent.
But their offensive line, who showed signs of life recently, turned almost like the pumpkin, turned back into a pumpkin last week, where Joe Burrow was getting sacked left and right. And they're just not opening up any holes on offense on that offensive line for Mixon to do anything. So I think the Bengals generally as a team are hot garbage at the moment. But I think Joe Mixon as a guy is still fantasy worthy. Because I'm still kind of lukewarm on him, but the Bengals are just not helping him out at all.
Dutton.
I'm buying it, but it's not because of Joe Mixon's talent. It's because of the play calling. That game started with Joe Mixon catching 3 or 4 passes on the first series, right? And I don't think they went back to him the rest of the game. I don't know what they're doing. They have something with Joe Mixon, but they're not utilizing him. And if they would utilize him, then T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd would become more effective without Jamar Chase, because then they might be like, oh, let's try to stop the run, and it opens it up. So, yeah, and I don't think it's Joe Mixon's fault. I think the Bengals are a total example of the losing Super Bowl team hangover and can't get out of their own way right now. There's no business for them to get shellacked like they did Monday night against the Browns. That was a terrible display. And I don't blame Joe Mixon, but I blame the coaching staff for making Joe Mixon fantasy garbage.
Well, I made the joke earlier in the season, and I'm sticking to it that the Bengals are the 2007 2012 Giants, right? They just got red hot down the stretch. They weren't a really good, no offense, Fee, but they weren't a really good football team that was looking to build a dynasty, and they've come back to reality this year, right? They have, and especially without Chase, it makes it that much worse. And I'm gonna give 2 points to Fee, but I'm gonna give 3 points to Dunton because I think the edge here is that it is the game planning. Because he did even on his best weeks, they're giving him the ball 15 times. Like he's
right. He doesn't touch the ball enough.
yeah, he's a guy that merits 25 touches a game between receiving and rushing, obviously. So yeah, I think there's a lot that's working against him. But sticking on running backs, we're going to talk about two backups, two RB2s, if you will, but have they played themselves into the must-start conversation? Fee, we're going to start with you. Buy it or BS, Jamal Williams and Khalil Herbert are must-starts no matter what the injury report is on Swift and Montgomery.
Well, I'm buying that they're must-starts right now, but it is kind of dependent on the injury report. At least in Detroit, I think it is.
Okay.
When DeAndre Swift is healthy, he's the guy. Okay, Jamal Williams is there and he's doing very well only because DeAndre Swift is hurt. Okay, and he's still hurt, and they said he's still hurt, and he also said that they might have rushed him back. So, Jamal Williams is an absolute must start this week again, at least until DeAndre Swift gets back on his feet and is somewhat close to healthy again, which, may not be for another, 2 or 3 weeks for that matter.
Yeah.
In Chicago, I think it's a different story. I think Khalil Herbert is a must start no matter what. David Montgomery, he was banged up a little bit, so he's sort of hurt, but sort of not. He was the guy for a little while. He was playing great. Then he came back to earth again. And Khalil Herbert has been a constant. He's been steady. And you can't kind of put, can't put that by him, especially in fantasy when you need, good, flex option or even a good running back option, especially if something should happen to David Montgomery. I think Khalil Herbert is a must start every week, at least as a flex option, because he's going to get you a minimum of 10 points likely.
Dutton.
Khalil Herbert is a must start. Jamal Williams is a plug and play if DeAndre Swift doesn't play. I mean, we all were down on Montgomery going into this season, and I think all of our premonitions were correct. He has touched the ball way too many times over the last 3 years. There's a lot of tread on that tire. But DeAndre Swift is still the guy as long as he's healthy in Detroit. But you're also talking about the Lions, who, let's be honest, I mean, their defense can't stop anybody. So at some point, they just start throwing the ball all over the field to try to catch up. So it kind of loses the running back. I mean, Jamal Williams is doing well right now, but I don't know if he's a must start, but Herbert is.
Fair enough. I'm going to give 1 point to Dutton for being right on Herbert, but I'm rolling with Fee. I think they're both 3 points for Fee. I think they're both must starts right now. Definitely. I think Khalil Herbert is a must start no matter what. But right now, Jamal Williams, I could see them shutting down DeAndre Swift. They got nothing, right? There's nothing left to play for in this season. And it's like you said, there are the reports. They're saying it. They're not even hiding it. They're saying we may have rushed him back, and I could see him shutting them down because why get that guy hurt this year? There's nothing to play for. Last week, we after the Matt Ryan benching, we talked about who would be benched, which old fart was going down next, whether it was Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. And we left the one guy off the list that probably is going to be. Buy it or BS, Dutton. Matthew Stafford is done.
Matthew Stafford has reverted back to the Lions version of Matthew Stafford. So he had one good run. He won a Super Bowl. And he will be the Doug Williams of the modern era, right? One Super Bowl. Yeah, he's done. I think he's done. He has Cooper Kupp as a wide receiver, and he can't get him the ball enough. And yeah.
Well, he gets him the ball in garbage time and then gives him a high ankle sprain and almost breaks his leg.
Right. Yeah, I think he's done. And I also read today that what's his name? Who's the coach of the Rams? McVay is leaving and retiring as soon as that core breaks up. So as soon as they're done with Stafford and Kupp and all those guys and Aaron Donald, McVay is retiring. So
That
yeah,
makes
I think
sense.
Matthew Stafford is done.
Faith.
How does that make How does that make sense? He's like 34
Well,
years
they were
old.
talking about he was going to retire after he won the
Last
Super
year.
Bowl.
Yeah.
They said after he was talking about it after he. So there's the fact that he's saying once all this team is done, he doesn't want to go through a rebuild. That doesn't surprise me at all.
Right.
Why? No, I mean it's. I mean it. Okay. Even if he's been talking about it, I still surprises me that a young coach like himself would want to retire. I don't know. It
Yeah.
doesn't really make sense to me. But anyway, yeah, I agree with Dutton. Everything he said. Matt Stafford does not look good at all. Now Kupp has gone down with injury, and he can't get the ball to anybody else. Like maybe Tyler Higbee, but he doesn't get the ball to Allen Robinson. It's almost like he's just locked in on Cooper Kupp, and like that's it. And maybe sometimes Higbee. Now with Cooper Kupp being hurt, like I that offense is just going to be a shell of itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, I hate to say it, but yeah, I mean, Matt Stafford is probably done for this year.
Yeah, and I think the big issue is it's not that Kupp. I agree that Kupp is the only weapon on that team. Nobody else is really good, but I think it's Stafford's arm. I don't think it's there anymore. I think it's as much him as it is the offense and what's going on there. So I think it's the perfect storm. And I mean, they're never going to bench. I don't even know who their backup is. Who is the Rams' backup? Does anybody know?
I'll look it up for you. I got a quick question for you while I'm looking this up. If the Lions shut down DeAndre Swift, are they totally playing for Bryce Young?
I mean, aren't you at that point?
You have to, right?
You're going to have the number one pick. I mean, they'll have it locked up because the Texans got the tie. So if they're both 1-win teams, the Texans have the Lions would have the worst record.
Right.
Is Bryce Young the consensus number one pick?
I mean, I don't know if there's a consensus.
I think he's the number one quarterback picked.
Right.
So.
Is it ahead of CJ Stroud?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I'm asking.
I mean, we're in week 8, right? Like,
I've been hearing a lot of different things.
Yeah. But I mean, whoever it is. But are you playing for your next quarterback? Is the better way to ask that question? And I would think so. But
John Walford and Bryce Perkins are the backup quarterbacks for the Ravens.
So they're not going to bench him, but we're going to watch a lot of bad football.
Right. At 4:00.
Yeah, 4:00 and in prime time. All right. So let's move on. We'll make it a tie this week because I forgot to keep track of the points that I was handing out. Good job by both of you. Let's move on to Calvin Ridley's locks of the week. Calvin Ridley, who's going back to Jacksonville, which was the game that he bet on with the Falcons that got him suspended. It was the Falcons-Jaguars game.
Perfect.
How's that for irony, folks? Calvin Ridley's locks of the week. If you want to try to figure out that trade, good luck to you because it's all depends on when he's reinstated. And the Falcons, I think if he's never reinstated, they may have to give up a draft pick in 3,042. Like that's how confusing it was trying to figure out what happens. Anyway, last week we went with the Washington Commanders and we won. Taylor Heinicke let that great comeback from behind against Frank Reich's meaningless offense that made no sense and didn't let the guy pass. And Michael Pittman dropped a huge pass. And the Commanders won. So we improved to 5-3 on the year. Let's start this week. Dunton, we'll start with you. Who are you taking?
I'm taking the Ravens -2.5 against the Saints. I know some people are hot on the Saints, but I just don't see the Saints shutting down Lamar Jackson. I don't. It's Monday night. It's in Baltimore. The Ravens are still in first place and have a chance to solidify a strong hold on first place if they can keep winning. So I'm going with the Ravens.
Well, that division sucks. Let's be real. And let's not forget about their defense. Their defense is going to be amped up. There's a lot of new toys on that defense.
Right.
Fee.
I'm going to leave my first choice to you because you had it first. So I'm going to go with Atlanta, who has just been absolutely insane this year.
Yeah.
And they are +3.5 against the Chargers, who have tons of injuries. Now I know they're coming off the bye, but Herbert hasn't looked like Herbert, and now no Mike Williams. I know Keenan Allen is coming back off an
No,
injury.
he's not. He
Nope.
said today that he came back too early, and he doesn't think he's going to play this year, is what he said.
Okay, so now they don't have any receivers. So I'm just gonna go with Atlanta +3.5. I'll take those points. Even if the Chargers somehow find a way to win this game
By a field goal, we win.
Yeah, I'm still gonna take Atlanta.
Don't quote me on this, but I believe the Falcons are 6-1 against the spread this year as well.
They are.
Right. So that's another good reason right there. Well, I'm taking the Bucks over the Rams. We kind of discussed the situation. The Bucks defense has still been pretty solid. Matthew Stafford has not. Cooper Kupp, I hate to say it because I have him and I need him to play this week, but I think if he does play, he's more of a decoy and he's just out there to try to get the other guys open the best he can. And there is nobody else. There just isn't. There's nobody else to get open. So I don't know, but I do want to. The Raiders are on the East Coast, which they're traditionally never good at. They just came off one of the ugliest performances of this season, and they're favored on the road.
They only got across the 50 one time, and that was at the end of the game.
It was horrible, and it wasn't even Carr at quarterback anymore.
Right.
It was
right.
what his name was. Can someone give me rationale on how did Trevor Lawrence get hurt or something?
Vegas is trying to get people to lose money big time. That's what's happening, right? They're trying to convince you that the Raiders are somehow going to pull this off. I really think so. I don't know. I think it's
have to give Raiders points, like make them favorite because
they're the Vegas Raiders, right?
Is there any rationale, Fee? Do you have anything to say on it?
No. Like Dunton said, Vegas is just trying to get you to
move the spread.
Yeah, to move this line. I agree with you though. I think the Raiders are, even though they scored 0 points last week, I think that they are probably the pick. Even as a favorite. Oh, actually, you're saying what the fuck? Why are they?
I think the Jaguars stop them.
No, I don't think so. I think that's exactly what Vegas wants you to think.
Yeah,
and I think what's going to happen is the Raiders are going to have kind of a resurgence here against the Jaguars. The Jaguars are not a good team.
No, okay. I'm not. They're not.
The Raiders aren't either.
Trevor Lawrence, Vegas isn't either. But I just think that Vegas has a lot more talent, and I think that they're going to have a bit of like a, just kind of, I don't want to say a resurgence, but like they're going to play a better game than they did last week. And I think playing against
if they get across the 50
and I
twice,
think playing against a crappy team like Jacksonville is kind of like, gets them right. Devontae, I feel like they'll figure out a way to get the ball to Devontae Adams. They got Josh Jacobs. There's no reason why the Raiders shouldn't win this game.
That's fair.
I'll tell you why the Raiders don't win this game. It's their head coach, and he has proven he's not a good head coach.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, look, I like Peterson too, and let's face reality. Like outside of Christian Kirk, those guys just aren't performing. It's not like Trevor Lawrence has a lot of weapons. The Ingram looks great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the best Ingram's I think looked in 5 years. And obviously Etienne is looking sharp too. So there's a couple pieces there. Just like the Raiders, there's just nowhere else to go once you're outside of Christian Kirk and Ingram. There's got to be more help. Marvin Jones is a nice piece, but he's old, right? He's not the guy that should be your number 2. And Zay Jones is just a rehash from, he was the 5th wide receiver on Buffalo, for crying out loud. Like, come on. So who are we locking in? Bucks minus. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, Wednesday night spreads. Bucks giving 3, Ravens giving 2.5, or the Falcons getting 3.5. Who do we
roll
like?
With the Falcons? They're our new Lions.
Okay.
I'm okay with the Falcons. I do like the Bucks
Yeah, I think
You two have too much trust in a team that's not good.
well, that's another game that both teams aren't good. So it's who's the less good. uh,
Yeah, they're both bad.
all right, a Fanduel Fee. You did pretty well last week on your stacks. So let's jump into Fanduel Fee's stacks of week 9.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you the rundown of what happened last week real quick.
Go for it.
I told you to play. My stacks were Geno Smith against the Giants with Kenneth Walker and Tyler Lockett. Geno wasn't all that great. I think he was like the 10th best quarterback or something like that, but it was a solid stack, especially for the price. I told you to play Jalen Hurts with AJ Brown. Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown were the number 1 and the number 1 at their position last week in fantasy. I told you to play Tua and stack him with Jalen Waddle. Tua, number 2, Jalen Waddle, number 4. Oh, by the way, better than Tyreek Hill, who was number 5.
Mm-hmm.
So that stack killed it. I told you to play Alvin Kamara, the number 3 running back in fantasy last week against Vegas. And I told you to play DeAndre Hopkins at 7,900 against Minnesota, who is, I think, the number 6 receiver in fantasy last week. So if you played any of those, if anybody listens to this, you killed it last week. I did have a couple of bad plays. I had 2 cheap options. I had Wan'Dale Robinson and Drake London, who were both awful. So I didn't go 100%, but those top 3 stacks and 2 one-offs were outstanding last week. All right.
What do you got for us this week?
Yes, this week. This week, I'm going to start us off with someone who's not very popular, Aaron Rodgers. They're playing Detroit, and we've spoken at length about how bad Detroit's defense is. I know Aaron Rodgers is not great, and neither is the guys around him. However, he's only $7,000 on FanDuel. If you stack him with Dobbs, he's only 6,100. You could even go to Aaron Jones at 7,800. I just think that Rodgers isn't as bad as like a Matthew Stafford or any of those other guys we spoke about earlier. And especially now against a Detroit team who's just gives up tons and tons of yards to quarterbacks. I think it's a solid play. Could be like a Geno Smith like was last week, top 10 type of quarterback for a cheap salary. So my next stack is Justin Fields. We spoke about him going up against Miami. Miami's defense has given up the 6th most yards to quarterbacks and the 4th most rushing yards to quarterbacks. Justin Fields, 60 yards rushing in his last 3 weeks, has been a solid quarterback for fantasy, and he's only at 7,400 this week. You could stack him with Khalil Herbert. He's a little bit higher at 7K. I would have loved to see him more around the 6K mark. But we spoke about Herbert as well. Could be a good stack with Justin Fields. I also like Kyler Murray. He's 8,200. I think he's the 3rd highest salaried quarterback on the slate. You could stack him with Rondale Moore, who they finally figured out to leave him in the slot. He's only 5,900. I'll talk about it later, but I don't really like DeAndre Hopkins against Seattle this week. Seattle has that shutdown corner who's been insane all year long. And I just think that, everyone's going to be on D-Hop for what he did last week. But I think this week is the week to go to Rondale Moore at 5,900. You could even throw in Zach Ertz at 6,600 against Seattle, who does give up a ton to the tight end as well. I don't mind playing a naked Herbert this week at 7,800.
Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert.
Sorry. Yes, Justin Herbert. And you could even pair him with Austin Eckler, but he's the highest priced running back on the slate at 9,400. And a couple of one-offs for you. I spoke about him earlier. Khalil Herbert at 7K. Really like him this week against Miami. Wayne and Dunton, you guys talked about Travis Etienne. He's a solid play against Vegas at 7,600. So you're not going to be paying a whole lot of money for a guy who's been really, really good fantasy wise, especially against a Raiders defense who has just been terrible against the run. And I actually really like Antonio Gibson this week. The Commanders figured out that they can throw the ball to him, and he's going to be a great kind of secondary back to Brian Robinson. And oh, by the way, he still gets 10 carries a game. He's only 6,100 against Minnesota. And we've spoken earlier about how Minnesota is on defense, which is not all that great.
Nice. All right. I like them. I like them all. We talked about a bunch of those guys earlier, so I definitely like those stacks. And I like how you dug into it a little deeper this week too. It's with the rankings. That was a nice little deep dive there. So let's move on to starts and sits. We're in the red zone now. Last week, the funny thing about last week is each of us went 5 for 8 with our picks, but overall we went 6 for 8 at a success rate. So I guess we picked each other's right picks and stayed away from the wrong ones. We gave you Brady, Ken Walker, DJ Moore as good starts. We did go with Irv Smith. The guy got hurt. There was only so much he could do, so he didn't finish the game. On the sits, we told you Rodgers, Montgomery, all the Steelers receivers. DJ had 50. Deontay Johnson was the highest ranked one last week at 55. And then Pickens was ranked 100. And then we did tell you to sit Kyle Pitts. He finally had a good week. So let's move on to week 9. Let's go to, before we do that, let's recap real quick. We do have Dak, Russell Wilson, Jimmy G on a bye for quarterbacks, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Zeke, Pollard, Gordon, Murray. If you want to throw Chase Edmonds in the mix, he is on a bye. Saquon Barkley, Najee Harris, CMC, your running backs are all on a bye. Jonathan Taylor sounding like he might not play this week with an injury. Then we talked about Keenan Allen, who's probably not going to play this week, Mike Williams, and then on your buys, you got Debo, who was already dinged up, Ayuk, Pickens on the Steelers, Lamb, Koopa Doop, and then tight ends, you're without Kittle and Freiermuth. So there is some work to do this week. That's a lot of fantasy goodness off the table. Let's just jump into it. Dunton, who are you starting this week at quarterback?
I'm starting Geno Smith, because why wouldn't you start Geno Smith? He's the belle of the ball this year. I mean, he is the surprise starting quarterback that every fantasy team should be looking for, especially with all those quarterbacks on buys.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been really impressive. It's fun to watch because he was so bad with the Jets. He was so bad. But it's not just he's really, really good. And he's really
he could have had 3 touchdowns last week if Tyler Lockett knew how to catch.
Yeah, I mean, he's been sensational on the long ball. His accuracy has been incredible this year. Yeah. And it's just it's not just he's in the right offense. It's a complete turnaround from who this guy was when he came in. And the Cardinals defense is
terrible.
Yeah. Fee, you already talked about yours, but why don't you go ahead and do it again?
Yeah, no, I did, but this guy, he has not been a starter for fantasy teams all year long, I would say. And especially now with all the buys this week, you got to start Aaron Rodgers against the Detroit Lions. I spoke about it earlier. The Lions are just really, really bad. You got to start Aaron Rodgers this week.
I'm going to tell you to start Trevor Lawrence. The Raiders not only give up the most points in fantasy, 26.4 points per game to quarterbacks, and they've allowed 15 passing touchdowns, but they've also allowed 3 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for the most. And Trevor Lawrence has proven to be the quarterback touchdown vulture this year. The guy is the king of the 1-yard touchdown. So you got a lot of fantasy goodness stacking up in his favor right there. I'm kind of on the Geno train. You're right. He is the belle of the ball, but I would start any 3 of these guys. So what do you guys think?
Let's start Rodgers because he's going to take some ayahuasca this week and destroy the Lions.
All right. Fair enough. Running backs. Fee, we'll start with you.
I'm starting Antonio Gibson against Minnesota. I spoke a little about him earlier. I think that he still gets half the carries with Brian Robinson, still getting 10 carries again. But now he's their main third down receiving back as well. And I think that's going to suit him just fine, especially against Minnesota.
Yeah. Dunton?
Deontay Foreman against the Bengals. They couldn't stop the run against the Browns. Deontay Foreman had 3 touchdowns last week.
Yeah.
He was solid. Like
2 weeks in a row.
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you start him, right?
Yeah. I'm going to tell you, Raheem Mostert. The Bears are choppy against the run. We did say their defense been a lot better, but they got no defensive line anymore, or defensive front, I should say. It's gone. So they've allowed 9 touchdowns on the ground already this year. I think Mostert's a good start, especially because their secondary has been kind of their strength. So maybe this isn't the big Tua game. Maybe it is the Mostert game. But I kind of like Foreman here, if I'm going to be honest with you. Out of the 3 that we're here, I wouldn't mind punching him in as our start of the week. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm on the Foreman train for sure.
All right, I'm going to start with wide receiver, and because we have to dig deeper as we just were talking with injuries and buys, and we kind of mentioned it, but let's not forget Cooper Kupp is still a very big question mark at this point too. I'm going to tell you to start McCall Hardman. He's scored touchdowns 2 weeks in a row. The Titans finally looked good against the pass, and it was against Davis Mills, so let's not give them too much credit, because let's take a sidestep here, gentlemen. How badly has Davis Mills regressed? Am I being biased as a Texans fan, or this guy was really good last year, and the thing that was good about him was his accuracy and his efficiency and his ability not to turn over the ball. The Texans got better arguably at every position on the field, and he has gotten so much worse, and I would argue the fact that he is the reason they've lost 3 of the games that they've lost, because they've been in just about every ball game that they've played, and it's been a costly turnover by him. Is Davis Mills the guy, or are the Texans looking for their next quarterback coming in this draft? What do you guys think?
I think it's a bit of growing pains for him. Like, I know he's not a rookie. Last year was his rookie year, but how many games has he played? He's what, on like game 14 or 15
Fair.
max? Which is less than Trevor Lawrence for sure.
Yeah.
But and I think it's just a bit of growing pains for him. I still think he's a decent quarterback. He has struggled mightily this year.
Yeah.
But I think it might be a little too early to write him off. But depending on where Houston falls in the draft pick situation this year, they may have to look at taking another quarterback if they're in the top 3, 4 in the draft this year.
Yeah. What do you think?
I mean, I think Fee said it. I think it's growing pains. I think defenses have figured him out. I think he might have not adjusted to defensive figuring him out. That's part of being a quarterback, is understanding that defenses are going to catch on to you, so you got to adapt to that. So, but I also mean, like, they have gotten better, but at the same time, how much better are they?
Right. They haven't gotten that much better, but,
right.
The offensive line is vastly improved, and they have a run game this year. They did not have a run game last year, and Pierce has proven to be the real deal.
Right.
So I mean, they are improved. Yeah, and I think a lot of it is what you said. There's just more film on him, right? And I think he's getting caught in that. And I hope they can. I like Mills. I was happy that he was the quarterback going into this year, but he's been rough. It's been not happy to watch. But anyway, I go back to, I'm taking Hardman, who is playing those same Titans. The Titans are terrible against wide receivers in fantasy. They're allowing 24 points a game, 9 touchdowns. And like I said, Hardman scored twice in a row, and they got that Sunday night game. So that's my pick. Dutton.
I'm starting Olave versus the Ravens, because as good as they've gotten up front, their secondary is still weak.
Yeah.
The Saints are going to have to throw the ball. So,
Hey,
I'm starting Christian Kirk against the Raiders. You spoke earlier about Trevor Lawrence and how the Raiders give up 26 points per game. Trevor Lawrence is going to have to throw it to somebody. Christian Kirk is his main squeeze. So I'm starting Christian Kirk against the Raiders.
I love Kirk here. I like all 3 of these guys.
I think Kirk's the play.
All right. Tight end, Dutton, give it a start.
Dawson Knox versus the Jets. Josh Allen is on fire with Dawson Knox. I think he scored touchdowns in his last 3 games, and I think it continues. Sauce Gardner's going to have to guard Stephon Diggs, so Dawson Knox will find some seams open and stuff like that. And Josh Allen is – I know that people say he's against Jalen Hurts for MVP, but Josh Allen's the MVP right now in my book. So,
Fake.
Well, I got 2 conditional picks. If Mark Andrews is still out for Baltimore, Isaiah Likely played out of his mind last week, and I don't think And I don't think that that's an aberration. I think he's very good, and he can definitely fill in solidly again if Mark Andrews is still out. My other pick was I really want to take TJ Hawkinson on the Vikings now, but new guy coming to a new team, doing new things with new guys, you never really know. So it's kind of hard to kind of say to start TJ, but I do like him, but I don't know that I could say he would be my start. So
I'm going to tell you, Zach Ertz. Fee, you kind of talked about it earlier. The Seattle's just not good against. It's funny. The two worst fantasy defenses against tight ends are playing each other. And if I had more faith in Will Disley, I would tell you to start him, but I don't. So I'm going to tell you that I think Zach Ertz is a very solid start this week. I mean, he was the number one essentially when Marquise Brown went down and D-Hop wasn't back. And now that D-Hop's back, he's still pretty much the number two, right? I mean, he's pretty much a must start in this position against the Seahawks, especially a big game for the Cardinals needing to win. So who do we think?
I'm going Ertz for everything that you said, but also I had mentioned it earlier. DeAndre Hopkins is going against the Seattle cornerback, and again I can't remember his name, but he's been really, really good this year, and I think he kind of takes away D-Hop all game long, and that's going to open up things for both Zach Ertz and Rondale Moore. So I like both of those guys, but I would start Ertz this week for sure.
Yeah,
I'll go with Ertz, but you're going to hear my thoughts on him later.
Okay, so let's move on. Oh, let's recap real quick. Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, Deontay Foreman at running back, Christian Kirk at wide receiver, and Zach Ertz at tight end. I want to throw out there that Evan Ingram's probably going to get in the end zone this week too, because the Raiders are horrendous against the tight end. Anyway, let's move on to sits for quarterback. Fee, we'll start with you.
Yeah, Matt Stafford against Tampa. I don't really have much else to say about it.
Yeah, I think we already discussed the rationale behind that, especially with the dinged up cut. Done.
I'm sitting the same guy you're sitting, and I don't care. It's Derek Carr. I mean, he's terrible. Josh McDaniels has made Derek Carr terrible, and sit Derek Carr. He has Devontae Adams, and I don't even use him. Sit Derek Carr.
Even without McDaniels, who I don't believe in as a head coach, the Raiders have been horrendous when they go to the East Coast. They always have.
Yep.
Even before Carr, they're one of those teams that don't travel the country well for some reason. I don't get it, but it's always been a Carr thing. So I agree with you. I don't think the Jaguars are this team that like, oh my God, you got to be afraid of the Jaguars. But I just don't feel like the Raiders have the momentum and the tools to excel right now. But I think Stafford's the locked in easy sit of the week here.
Stafford it is, but Carr's going to suck. Go.
I'm going to start at running back because I'm about to tell you to sit the number one overall pick in almost every draft that there was. And first of all, Jonathan Taylor may sit. He's dinged up. He's hurt. He didn't practice today. Again, it's Wednesday. Your weekly reminder. This is Wednesday practice reports. He didn't practice today. It sounds like it's a pretty bad, not bad, but significant injury that there could be time missed. So if that's the case, I'm telling you to also sit Deion Jackson, who I do really like as a running back and as I like as a backup running back. But the Patriots are second best against running backs in fantasy, and they've only allowed one touchdown to running back on the ground in fantasy this year. So I think Jonathan Taylor's to sit, but if he doesn't go and he's out, I'm even going to go one step further and tell you to sit Deion Jackson. So Colts running backs are your sits of the week. Fee.
So this is going to be an unpopular opinion, especially because Dunton is starting Deontay Foreman, and so are we, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But I have Deontay Foreman as a sit, and it's really because the Cincinnati Bengal defense are the 8th best defense against the running back, fantasy-wise in the league. And Carolina just doesn't really do it for me. I know he was really good last week, and I feel like he's a really good running back, but Cincinnati's defense has just proven that they can kind of hang with good running backs. So I got him as a sit just based on Cincinnati's defense being top notch against the running back fantasy wise.
Well, Chubb did well last week, didn't he?
Yes.
But he's
That's what I
also
was gonna say.
yes, but he's also Nick Chubb.
I'm not saying Foreman's Nick Chubb by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. Dutton.
I'm sitting Damian Pierce versus the Eagles. It's just not the Texans' week this week.
Yeah,
That's Wayne's guy.
I have to start him too in my one league because of buys and such. Who do we want to lock in?
It's got to be Pierce or Taylor or the Colts, right?
Yeah.
I'd sit the Colts.
I really don't think Taylor's going to play.
I don't think he is either.
They have no reason to push him at this point, right? But right. I think, and that's the thing. The reason I bring up Deion Jackson is because the 1 week that he started, he had that monster week, and I could see a lot of people going back to the waiver wire to try to pick him up. This isn't the week to do that.
Yeah, no, don't be fooled.
Let's go to wide receiver, and I'll start here again, and I'm picking Devontae Smith, and the reason is I think Hurts has a huge game. I think Miles Sanders has a huge game. I think AJ Brown has a huge game, and I think Dallas Goedert has a huge game. But the Texans have been surprisingly well against the pass, and they've also been surprisingly well against the secondary receivers. That's where they've been winning the battles. And I think that all the volume in the air game is going to go to AJ Brown, just like it did last week. So I'm going to tell you, I know you're going to see the Eagles matchup and think everyone's a starter. So I think this is a bit contrarian, and people might not understand what I'm saying. But I think Devontae Smith is a sit this week. Fee.
Yeah, I spoke about it earlier several times about Seattle's secondary and their defense. And their ability to shut down the opposing team's #1 wide receiver. So I'm going to sit DeAndre Hopkins this week off a huge game last week, coming off an injury. Yeah.
And
I'm sitting Mike Evans. He's banged up, and I think this is a Chris Godwin week against the Rams.
Fair enough. Who do we like here? I'll sit Mike Evans. That guy, he betrays me every time.
Yeah, he's either going to be terrible or he's going to have like 200 yards and 4.
Yeah, there's no in between with this guy, right? There's no 8-point game for Mike Evans. It's either 0 or 42.
Right.
So let's go to tight end, and we'll start with Dunton because it's our start of the week.
Yeah, I'm sitting Zach Ertz, much like Fiamano is sitting our starting at running back. I'm sitting Zach Ertz. The Seahawks defense is not as bad as people are telling us they are. Like they're not.
I don't think so, but they're not good against the tight end.
They're not, but I also don't trust the Cardinals at all. So I'm sitting Zach Ertz.
I think that's the issue is I don't trust Kyler Murray, and I don't trust. Well, you know my feelings on Cliff Kingsbury,
right?
So yeah, I do agree with you there.
So I think I read my stat sheet here wrong, because I thought the Buccaneers were very good against the tight end, but I think I got that opposite. I don't think they're very good against the tight end. I have Tyler Higbee as a sit, and I'll stick with him even though the Bucs are not that good against the tight end. Only for the reason that Stafford is our sit of the week, because I feel like Tampa's D is good enough to hold that entire offense down. So
yeah, I agree with you. I'm gonna just say Tyler Conklin. The tight end position, I should say, is obviously not good. A guy has a week like Tyler Conklin did last week. He's gonna be the big waiver wire pickup. Here's the difference about this week, that the Jets are playing the Buffalo Bills. And the thing that's not different is that Zach Wilson is still the quarterback. So don't go starting any Jets this week, like any Jets. But I'm going to tell you, I just feel like, right? Doesn't it feel like Conklin's going to be the big waiver wire pickup?
He was going to be my sit until I saw you had him there. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Tyler Conklin is a huge waiver wire pickup this week for, for good reason. Tight end, like you said, tight ends have just been in such a terrible
You get the guy that gets 2 touchdowns, everyone's going to go after him, and it's an anomaly. I think I don't see that happening again.
Yeah, I'm good with sitting Conklin.
You want to make him the start? Yep. Okay, so recapping our sits: Matthew Stafford, Colts running backs, because we think that Jonathan Taylor will sit. Scratch. I'm having trouble, guys. Will be an injury scratch this week. Mike Evans and Tyler Conklin. Anything else to add before we sign off this week, gentlemen? Did we forget any trades or anything?
There's too many. There's too many.
Yeah, and we don't do IDP, so we don't have to really worry about the defensive
Right
that went down. But it was fun to see Christian McCaffrey do the hat trick,
the triple double,
the triple double, and
That was awesome.
yeah, the 49ers are going to be a handful, especially if Eli Mitchell gets back healthy and they got those two guys coming out.
Not only are they going to be a handful,
and
they're running away with that division.
I mean,
and Debo,
because the division is terrible, and
Debo didn't play last week either.
I know, it's
Right.
crazy. All right, well, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week. Go out there, go win some money, and Junior Mafia lose to us. Have a good week.